nothing has changed, which brings into question for me an opinion piece that appeared in the New York Times this morning by Bret Stephens, who is one of their lead conservatives, right? This guy really pisses me off sometimes, but it's the nation's newspaper of record, one of the two or three that claims that title, and so many media outlets right now are terrified of sounding too liberal. I mean, look what's happening at CNN with their new manager, their new CEO or whatever. They're talking now about eliminating some of the people. They already have. Reliable Sources host was kicked to the curb a couple of weeks ago. The attempt is to make CNN more like Fox. Yeah, which is really a shock to me. I mean, it really is. When I worked at CNN, we were about news. We weren't about opinion. And over the years, there is no such thing left except local newscasts that allegedly are about news and not opinion. But CNN was all about news. I can remember some of the speeches that Ted Turner gave to us when he only started CNN in 1980. And the speeches that he gave to us about the mission of CNN was to present the news without personality overload. He didn't want people to be identified. Oh, that's, so-and-so at CNN. No, he wanted this. Oh, that's the news I heard on CNN. And for a while that worked okay. And then personality and the anchors started to creep in. I say creep in, but there were certain anchors at CNN, Don Farmer, Chris Curl were two of them, who insisted on the celebrity of being stars at CNN. Well, that was the beginning of the end for only news, not personality or opinion. Well, like every media outlet, CNN has changed over the years. It now provides probably, I don't know, pick a number, Mike, 60% of its newscasts are about opinion. 100% of newscasts on MSNBC, which there really aren't any, except Morning Joe does some news now. 100% of what is presented on MSNBC is, let's be honest, opinion. Over at Fox, it's sewer politics from the moment they turn on the computers in the morning to the moment they don't turn them off, really. So the idea that the New York Times has to have a couple of conservatives, okay, that's fine with me. But Bret Stephens, to put it mildly, this guy really kind of irritates me. Let me tell you why. In today's column, headlined "With Malice Toward Quite a Few," which is a play on Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address. I guess it was his inaugural address. In 1860, which is right on the cusp of the Civil War. And Lincoln tried to offer an olive branch to the South. He did. In that speech, it was his second speech, that promised malice toward none, after the Civil War left about 700,000 Americans dead. And the Civil War was caused by white racist scum in the South. I don't give a shit how somebody wants to rationalize it and say, come on, Mike, these are people who relied on their, on their slaves to maintain their economic status or their economic growth. That to me is horseshit. If I never hear that again, it would be too soon. But the reason 700,000 Americans died, and there's no telling how many were grievously wounded and survived, is because the white owners of enslaved people in the South decided that it was worth it, that 700,000 dead, breaking the country into pieces was worth it. Just like the MAGA Trump bastards feel the same now. It's exactly the same thing. But anyway, in both those speeches, his first inaugural address, Lincoln's, and then his second speech after the Civil War, both of those speeches have been should have been part of the teaching of American history in our classrooms. I remember both because I don't have them memorized, but I remember being told about both speeches, and they've been revered because they offered a measure of redemption and a way of trying to reconcile and bring the country back together, which the white people in the South absolutely refused to do. And so Brett establishes that, and then he goes on to talk about Joe Biden's speech in Philly last week that I talked about yesterday. And he says that Biden's speech in Philly last Friday bears no resemblance to either one of Lincoln's addresses, except in Biden's own inaugural address. If you remember, he said he was going to end, quote, this uncivil war that pits red against blue, end quote. And as Brett points out, like Biden's predecessors, he denounces, excuse me, like the predecessors, the people he denounces. Biden, according to Bret Stephens, has decided the best way to seek partisan advantage is to treat tens of millions of Americans as the enemy within. Now, right away, you should guess what Bret Stephens is writing about. And what he's writing about is the threat to democracy, the real, honest threat to democracy that these MAGA scum represent. And so the question that Brett asks, how can an American president go wrong in identifying threats to democracy? And then he answers his own question by saying Biden offered a masterclass. I mean, this is crazy, but what the hell? And Bret Stephens wants to start with the term MAGA Republicans. And if you remember, Biden said they, quote, represent an extremism that threatens the very foundation of our republic, end quote. Does anybody disagree with that? Can I see a show of hands? No hands. Okay, we all agree that these MAGA scum do represent an extremism. I mean, for Christ's sake, it's as close to fascism as you can get without translating it into German or Italian. Come on, really? So who are these MAGA Republicans? Well, Biden offered a very legitimate and easily understandable definition. Biden said that they are, quote, not even the majority of Republicans, end quote. You know, he's trying to cut him some leeway there. Joe Biden trying to backpedal a little bit because he's Joe Biden. And then Biden went on to describe what they are about. And in listening or reading his speech from last Friday, I see nothing that I agree with. But not so the Honorable Bret Stephens. He writes that Biden cast a net so wide, it included everyone from those who cheered the attack on the Capitol and the efforts to overturn the election to those who oppose abortion rights and gay marriage. Oh, Bret, for God's sake, are you kidding me? That's not what Biden said at all, and it's not what he inferred. Biden is a Bible-toting Catholic, for Christ's sake. He goes to church every Sunday. I'm sure he goes to confession. He doesn't care for abortion. He is opposed to it. And Biden's position, Brett, is that anyone who is opposed to it, don't have it done. That's all. It's so simple. And see, these right-wingers, these so-called conservatives, are always talking about their version of freedom. Their version of freedom is do what I say, or what the church says, or what the Republican leadership says. Do that. And that constitutes freedom. Kiss my grits, Bret Stephens. But anyway, let me go on. His categorizing the MAGA Republicans in the broad net that he did cast. And I admit that Biden did that. Not that he needs my admission, but the reason he cast a broad net is because there are millions of these scum. And it includes, as Stephens points out, these sick bastards, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. But then Brett says it also includes every faithful Catholic or evangelical Christian whose deeply held moral convictions bring them to oppose legalized abortion. Well, Brett, once again, I just have to say it. To every faithful Catholic or evangelical Christian, as you identify them, although Catholics are Christians, dumbass, but to every one of those people, that you seem to say have been included in Biden's condemnation, let me just say again, Brett, if they are opposed to abortion, good, fine. There's nothing dishonorable about that. But when they go to make opposition to abortion such they legalize it to the point that any woman who wants to have the procedure is considered a criminal. What the fuck is wrong with you, Bret Stephens? Is that your version of freedom? It is. I'll answer my own question, because Bret Stephens is a semi-fascist. He's one of the people that Biden was identifying. Now, I realize that Bret Stephens has been anti-Trump, but he's not anti-Trump's ideas. Trump is a fucking buffoon. He's an idiot. He's a very dangerous buffoon. He has the power to bring death and destruction more so than he already has in his first 4 years in office. We know this. Bret Stephens knows this. But that doesn't stop Bret Stephens from defending the MAGA Republicans. Well, let me carry on. So he says, Bret Stephens writes, I should say, that Biden's condemnation includes the anti-Semites who marched in Charlottesville. You remember that? But then he goes on to say, as well as socially conservative Americans with traditional beliefs about marriage. What? What he's trying to say there, what Brett is saying, is that Biden is lumping into this category of MAGA Republicans people who fart and wheeze and scream and try to get laws passed stopping people from participating in a civil, legal ceremony. The fucking church, Brett, has nothing to do with marriage, which is why, as I've said how many times now, 80, why every religious figure who sanctifies, so to speak, a marriage says at the very end, now by the power vested in me, by the state of Ohio, whatever, I pronounce you man and wife, husband and wife, man and woman, man, wife and husband, whatever it is. But Brett leaves that out, see? He wants us to believe, this right-winger, Bret Stephens, wants us to believe that Biden includes, or I should say that Biden, that Biden includes people who are opposed to traditional marriage. No, he's not. Biden's own sons had traditional marriages. Biden has had two. Most people have traditional marriages sanctified by some screwball religious organization. What Biden is saying is don't stop there, since marriage is, in fact, a civil contract between two people. It has nothing to do with any fucked up religion. Nothing. Except to the extent that the people getting married want to have it sanctified by some sky spook. Okay. Do that. But what about the people who fall in love with people of the same gender, the same sex, the same sexual orientation? Label it any way you want. I really don't give a shit. Bret Stephens feels that those people that would want a same-sex marriage are somehow beyond the pale. But he twists it around and makes it sound as if Biden is condemning them. No, he's not. What Biden is condemning is exactly what Bret Stephens is implying, that there should be a law or a series of laws against same-sex marriage. So then he goes on to say that Biden's wide net encompasses election deniers like the scumbag Sidney Powell and her scumbag accomplice John Eastman. He wants us, Bret Stephens wants us to believe that Biden is putting those two morons, those two monsters, along with ordinary Americans who have been, and this is the term Stephen uses, bamboozled into harboring misguided but sincere doubts about the integrity of the last election. Sincere doubts. Brett Stevens, you're so full of shit. It's just, I wouldn't know where to begin if you and I could sit down across the table from each other. Sincere doubts. When 60 court rulings have said it was legal, when every single investigation by the scum of the MAGA scumbags of Trump, every single investigation has proven that the election was legal, right, proper, and just, and the correct decision by the electorate was the correct. But you don't include that, do you, Mr. Brett Stevens? When you talk about these people who've been bamboozled into having sincere doubts about the integrity of the election, you know what my answer to that is? Those fucking people are either lazy or dumber than a sack full of doorknobs, or both. What does it take to become unbamboozled, Brett? But what he is saying is that these MAGA scum are so empty-headed, so unwilling to challenge this horseshit that comes from the neo-fascist right in this country, that they have been bamboozled into believing something that is patently proven over and over again untrue. Come on. And then, oh, this pisses me off. And then Brett Stevens goes on to say that Biden claimed to distinguish MAGA Republicans from mainstream Republicans, and then proceeded to lump them together. No, he didn't. He didn't do that at all. Liar. Jesus Christ. And then Stevens writes this: that may resonate with partisan Democrats who have never seen a conservative they didn't consider a bigot or a fool, but it gives the lie to the idea that dismantling MAGA Republicanism is the prime objective of the president or his party. Okay, let's back up just a little bit. What the MAGA Republicans and Trump and these neo-fascist Nazi bastards have done and are doing, Brett wants us to believe it may resonate with partisan Democrats. Are you fucking crazy? Brett Stevens, in your own columns over the 4 years that this scum was the president, you continued to attack him, and rightfully so. And as a result of attacking him, you were attacking Trumpism and anyone who participated in it. But now, all of a sudden, what, did the editors at the New York Times tell you were getting too far to the left, Brett? Is that the reason you came up with this bullshit column? Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.